Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Trident Talks. Today, I'm very happy to say that we are joined with Mark Arena, the Chief Exec of Intel 471, and we're going to spend, I suppose, however long it takes, just to discuss threat intel in general, the services that you guys offer, and more about Intel 471. Because I know there's so many people who I speak to who want to know more about you guys. You come up in conversation a lot, and then just generally the life cycle of threat intelligence, how it can be applied in the real world, and also I would like to know from you, Mark, what you believe is the future of threat intel. Who are you? What's your background? I suppose, how did you get to where you are now at 471?
Cool. Thanks for the opportunity, Josh. So starting with, I'm Mark Arena, like you said, the founder and CEO of Intel 471. My background is actually a little different to most people in this space in that I actually came from a software engineering and a programming background. So studied university in Perth in Western Australia. From there, I worked as a programmer. Actually, my first job out of university was developing systems like the Oyster system on, I think Oysters London or Oysters
the travel card. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that was my first job, actually developing software, basically contactless smart card kind of payment systems for automatic fare collection for public transport all over the world. So if anybody's watching from Seattle, I actually worked on the Orca card in Seattle. So that was my first job. Then I worked for a Australian defence contractor, which contracted to the Australian Navy as a programmer. From there, I moved from Perth to Canberra, where I worked for the Australian Federal Police. I was not a police officer there, I was a technical specialist. So my job was to kind of focus on, I guess, unique or once-off capability development for operations. So there's a percentage of the population that is technical, whether they're a criminal or not. And, some of the crimes that the federal police in Australia are investigating had offenders that were technical. And so my job was to help investigators for those kind of percentage of operations. From there, I got recruited to the threat intelligence company iSIGHT Partners. So iSIGHT's now been purchased or been acquired a couple of years ago by FireEye. And I started at the bottom. So I started as a researcher. So when first day I was there, in the underground talking to criminals. At that point, Anonymous was quite at the forefront. So I was heavily involved in tracking anonymous actors and LulzSec actors and things like that, but also doing financially motivated cybercrime. And so I was just doing that from home in Australia. And then I got the opportunity to move to the European headquarters for iSIGHT, which was in Amsterdam at the time. And so I was kind of promoted and I became the chief researcher at iSIGHT. So at that point, I was kind of not really kind of management responsibility from a people side, even though I had a small team. I was very much focused on, how do we make this whole team, so iSIGHT has an Intel team or collection or research team all over the world. How do I kind of work in a common way, a common process? How do we scale it? You don't want all these people all over the world on different time zones having outputs that are totally different. So how do you get it? So that was kind of what my focus was. At iSIGHT, our kind of research, what we did was an internal capability. So what we provided was all to the analysts who are mostly in Washington, DC area, who would then write Intel products for the iSIGHT's customers. And so I started to see, hey, there's an opportunity here in the marketplace where what happens if, our customers were the direct analysts in these large organizations, whether they're banks, government, financial, I said banks, e-commerce, technology companies, etc. Especially at that time, the big organizations started hiring their own intelligence analysts, and they'll typically form a law enforcement, military type people. And, being an Intel analyst in one of these organizations, you're used to one of these government agencies, you're used to having raw collection that you can use and leverage and then write your Intel products. And so that was kind of the start of Intel 471 was, we want to start being a really, really good collection capability focused on financially motivated cybercrime. So criminals are in it for the money. And then it kind of leveraged into other areas where we have our own analysts who write kind of what we call traditional kind of finished intelligence products as well.
Very humble beginnings, right at the bottom of iSIGHT, worked your way up. What sort of year was this then that you founded Intel 471?
It was about 6 years ago, and I remember sitting at home in my my apartment in Amsterdam, super lonely because I was the only person. Go, okay, what do I do now? And, like you said, it was humble beginnings. We didn't take any money, so we didn't take any external investment or any debt or anything to get going. And, it was I won't lie, it was a massive slog, and it still is. But it started, and then we got our first couple of people, employees and members of the team. Actually, the first 3 or 4 or 5 are still here at Intel 471, which is really, really good. And they've, obviously they started as an individual contributor because everybody was an individual contributor at that point, and just the functions are basically growing underneath them. So now some of them are running, or at least one of them, who's based in Kiev in Ukraine, runs a team globally, which I think would be about 40, 50 people. I think probably 6-12 months from now it'll probably be a lot larger again. So yeah, that was kind of the start, and we just kind of started getting initial customers, and then it kind of snowballed. The threat intelligence industry, you probably know yourself, is very well connected and socializes and shares a lot, and word of mouth kind of spread around what we were doing, and hopefully people say we have a good reputation. You've said the same. Hopefully we do. And it just kind of snowballed from that.
When did you know that you thought, holy shit, this could be something, and we could be a team of 50 plus, and in 6 years' time, we could have a very good reputation, and everybody knows us as this cyber criminal closed source experts that do obviously push out traditional reports, but do lots of, I suppose you're like the go-to for collections, right? That's what everyone knows 471 as. Yeah. When did you know that? Was it immediately? Obviously, like you said, it's a long slog. I can imagine it's a lonely time in that apartment in Amsterdam on your own. Yeah. And did you get to a point where you thought, shit, this may not work, or was there like a light bulb moment when you hired your first person? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the moment where I thought it might not work was when you're dealing with the procurement department of very, very large organizations.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, nothing goes fast in procurement, and there's nothing you can do or your champion on the customer side to push it can make things go faster. Yeah. And so at some point I was, very, very early on, there was like are we going to have enough money to survive? Dealing with these procurement departments, because they take months in some cases. And interestingly enough, everybody tells me their procurement department is the worst. I won't tell you who the worst is, but I'll tell you most obviously are wrong. But
it's because you still work with them.
I would just say that saying that some people have the reputation, their organizations have the reputation of being the worst, but they're not. I've actually had that happen where you think somebody's got the reputation of being good and it's bad, and vice versa. But yeah, I'd say there was no light bulb moment, the opposite, where I was like, okay, we're going to be successful. Because I mean, it was like a waterfall, bit by bit by bit by bit. I think we have a lot of clients today, and we're a big, 110 person company. But I always just say like, hey, we're never going to be perfect. We're never going to know everything all the time. That's the nature of intelligence and intelligence collection. But we want to be what we want to be. Every 6 months, we want to look back and say, hey, we're so much better than what we were 6 months ago. So that's really my objective.
Constantly pushing forward. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Did you have to take funding, or have you done it all organically?
All organically.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So, has its pros and its cons. Pros being, I can't get fired by the board. Probably the best pro. Con being, I mean, you basically, our sales and marketing team is significantly less than what it should be for a company of this size. If there's one thing holding us back as a company, it's sales and marketing, or lack thereof. The team is just not big enough to get our name out. People know in the industry that we do, like you said, cybercrime intelligence, but when you start getting out to the people who might not be fully integrated into the threat intelligence communities, that they might not know of us. So your role now, chief exec, and obviously you've always been the founder of 471. What does that entail? Do you do a lot of traveling, or obviously prior to lockdown? Do you still get involved? Are you still rolling your sleeves up and getting hands-on? And I can imagine you kind of like to do the doing still. Yeah, I mean, I like to do the doing and the intel and the research. Unfortunately, I haven't done it for a couple of years now. Super shame. I'll tell you, if you're become the CEO of your own business, it's not all it's cracked up to be. I mean, it has its pros in that, I have a massive team behind me. We can move in a certain direction, rightly or wrongly. We can move in a certain direction, and get the people and can shape it how we want and create the strategy that we can then implement. And effectively, I'm accountable to our customers more than anything. If you're a VC-backed firm, you're obviously accountable to your shareholders and the board as well. But yeah, I mean, so my job, I used to travel a lot before lockdown. I was traveling 5 or 6 times a year to the US, London a couple of times, Middle East a couple of times, Australia a couple of times, Singapore a couple of times. So it is a killer. I have a young family, daughter that's just less than 2. Definitely impacts your life. But yeah, my job is very much on, like I said, going back to that 6 months, we want to be better than what we were. Who do I need? Who should I be talking to? What are the strategic partners of the company? Like the Anomaly, the Eclectic IQ, the Threat Quotient, the Connect. How do we work with those guys? How do we work with the other large security vendors? Because we do something that's really good, and a lot of them, like you said, don't do what we do. They might do something similar, but we want to work with those people, and integrate into their products. And so a lot of my work at the moment is around that.
So lots of strategic partnerships.
Yeah, and maintaining relationships at the senior level at a lot of these large companies.
I sense a bit of envy towards your researchers and your analysts, where they are doing the good work still, and you kind of want to, if time permitted, you would still get involved, wouldn't you? And you'd still be there alongside them, rolling your sleeves up.
Yeah, 100%. And it's sometimes I get too involved, and I have to get told, "Hey guys, ease off."
Get your head up. Yeah,
exactly. Seagull management, right? You come in, you do something, and then you leave without seeing the results. And so I always have to be reminded of that. I'm Australian, I'm pretty direct. I like people in the company to be very direct to me. I'm not going to get offended. And one thing I always tell people as well is, as we get bigger and bigger, I'm making decisions and I'm making more and more assumptions. And, it's not bad. That's just the reality of when an organization is larger. So if I'm going to walk into a wall, I need people to tell me, advise me that's going to happen. But yeah, I do envy the research that's going on sometimes. It's really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Your team are based, a lot of guys are remote and girls are remote. You obviously have people strategically placed in certain locations for obvious reasons, right? How do you build a culture? And I want to talk about the social kind of dynamics of everybody. And I know you guys are quite good on social media, where you kind of, I don't know if it's monthly or weekly, almost like fancy dress, whatever the theme might be. And I see that a lot, right? And I love it. Everybody gets involved. I think a lot of it was 4th of July theme and things like that. Are you consciously making decisions to continually bring everybody together? And because, like you said, you've had people been with you since the start, right? That's no small feat, and it means a lot going forward when people want to join your business and they go, well, what's the culture like? Right? You will speak to X over there who's been here since we started, and it's been a struggle, but he or she is still here. Are there particular things that you're putting in place?
I think that things I'd be putting in place would be too strong a word to describe what I was doing. I always push the culture, work hard, play hard. Mm-hmm. And, we always, on the intelligence side, we want humble professionals, team players. We don't want people driven by ego. We want people, who want to fight the fight, fight against these cyber criminals. I mean, they are making a lot of money and they're having a lot of damage. And if you're going to say who's winning right now, you'd probably say the bad guys are. I don't know how you could look at what's happening and say that the good guys are winning. So, I think that's kind of what my focus is. The fancy dress, I can't claim any credit at all for that. Had nothing to do with it. That was within the team themselves, which was good. But yeah, and so from an office perspective, our biggest office actually by far is in Kiev, in Ukraine. So, but we have folks, Ukraine, Romania, Netherlands, UK, Israel, India, Colombia, Brazil, Singapore, Australia, everywhere. But yeah, it's hard. We get everybody together on the all hands. Obviously, before lockdown, we had a lot of people traveling around meetings, whether they're meeting in the US. We had our sales kickoff, for example, in southern France, on the Riviera.
Nice.
Where that was in January. I mean, we're going to have another one in January, hopefully. I'm not sure if it'll happen though. Might have to do it virtually. But yeah, I think, those are the main things I've done. And also just comes into the hiring, right? Like I said, we need to find people that are not, no one at Intel 471 is going to be famous, personally out there. We're just not like that. And even like you said about social media and how we do it, I mean, there's no coordination behind that. I mean, there's coordination between the company and what gets pushed out from the company accounts, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter. But even then, I think that's been a struggle for us to, how do you communicate enough that you're helping, at no point do we want to communicate things publicly that help the bad guy become better bad guys. Keep off the bad guy that what we're doing and how we're going to do it. So it's a very hard balance to do that. And just by nature, me and the people we hire don't want to be talking publicly about things. So it actually is a really big struggle. Like, how do you communicate these concepts safe, ethically, and not burn things that are going on?
You mentioned one thing there, which is all around hiring, and you said it starts with the people you bring in, right? Of course it does. And you're not a draconian leader that says you must go and wear fancy dress every Friday at all hands. Of course not. So what do you guys look for when you are hiring? Of course it changes on whether you're looking for a developer in Kiev or you're looking for a researcher or an Intel analyst. Is there like a matrix or a kind of an idea of the kind of person you hire consistently in terms of like soft skills, technical skills and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, technical skills is depending on the job, but soft skills, we want, team players, no ego. Like I said, we want that work hard, play hard, sure. Humble, super humble. Before they even get to an interview, they go through the HR person, and the HR is very much, not so much testing on do you fit the technical skills, because that comes later, is do you fit culture-wise with the company? Because, like any company, we've had a few folks that didn't work out, and it wasn't based on their technical skills. Technical skills are easy to assess comparatively compared to, personal skills, what drives you as a person. So yeah, I think culture is probably the biggest thing that we look to assess. Are they going to fit in culturally? And that is, like I said, humble experts, quiet professionals. That's really what it boils down to.
Okay, then moving on. You published an article, albeit was it more of a rant on Sunday around your views on intelligence and what you believe to be true intelligence, and I suppose also what isn't intelligence in your own views. Let's talk through that. Some very good views. It got some good traction and some good debates, should we say, on the comments page, and some really good points actually.
Yeah, it was just me writing on a Sunday. I was somewhat surprised by the reaction that you got.
Yeah, it's good. It was good. So you mentioned what isn't intelligence, and then you go on to what is, and also you talk through the life cycle, right? Through direction all the way to dissemination.
Yep.
Talk to us what you believe isn't threat intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think if I go back to, threat intelligence, the words, right? Threat, starting with threat is a person with a motivation and a goal and a way of working. That's the TTPs. So threat intelligence is tracking people and groups. Like, that's the name, that's the word, right?
Yeah.
And intelligence being the intelligence cycle, what you just talked about, the process and the output of the process is intelligence. So, there's a lot of companies that consider, event-based stuff or incident response, where it's like my compromised credentials or brand monitoring. My brand got mentioned in the deep and dark web. I hate that term, by the way. But, my brand got mentioned. That's threat intelligence. I'm like, how is that? Like, that's an incident. Whether that's like computers being compromised in your environment or some of your data is being leaked onto Pastebin, that's still an incident, right? It just happens to be the Pastebin is in the cloud, and I just define the cloud as somebody else's computer. So from my perspective, there's a few things I see, and I'm in a very unique position, and I see a lot of Intel programs globally. I see across all over the world, all different sectors, and, I have an independent view, and hopefully I help them regardless of whether they're a customer or not. But yeah, one of the key things I see is that, threat intel teams get hamstrung by this responsibility of responding to fake apps in the App Store or Google Play Store, fake domains being registered. And it's like, okay, that's reacting to stuff that's happening. But when you want an Intel team, to be proactive and intelligence-led, because that's what you're paying for. And, intelligence is expensive. When I always do a talk about building an Intel program, I always put a $sign in front of intelligence to just, reflect how expensive it is. Like, this is not a cheap thing to do. And so, yeah, that was kind of what the rant was about. That was one piece, when people talk about threat intelligence, you got to be about tracking people and groups. And then how do you kind of prioritize and do that? How do you define what's relevant to your organization? And so that was kind of what you described rant. I think it was an accurate reflection of what it was.
I think it's important to threat intelligence, like you said, it's not a piece of malware, is it? Threat is a person, it's a motivation, a goal, it's a TTP, and it's been able to wrap that up into a report which is disseminated to whoever is the audience that's timely and it's accurate, right? And it can actually be actionable. I think it's interesting because you have like we alluded to previously, the big vendors or whoever it may be in the Intel world who are highly backed by VCs and investors and stuff, and they want you to believe threat intel is what they offer, when it can be, like you said, I've done a bit too basically, but it genuinely is just tracking people and threat actors and making sure that you can give, I suppose, the stakeholders or whoever's reading the report a heads up on X, Y, Z is going to happen. It may affect your organization because of this reason. It might be a geographical location, it might be a technology or a vulnerability. Yeah, interesting.
Perfect example of that, just on that, is ransomware, right? No, I get so many requests about like people like, hey, can you give me the latest, technical details or indicators of compromise for ransomware? And I'm like, does it really matter? Because you think of ransomware, the ransomware is being dropped by intrusions that actors have done. So they've already got access to an environment, then they drop ransomware. When they're in an environment, it's not just one computer, it's a multiple. So what they're going to do is they're going to get a piece of ransomware, they're going to test it on one, it's either going to work or it doesn't. If it doesn't, they're just going to try something else. And ransomware changes so fast and it's so easy to write ransomware that they're just going to keep trying and eventually they'll find something that works. So the reality is there's no IOCs I can provide or anybody can provide on ransomware that is likely going to stop the business impact of somebody. So you're better off like looking up, okay, what is the precursors to ransomware? Precursors to ransomware is infections with these other pieces of malware. Okay, let's look at that from a, like a technical perspective. And think, okay, how is that malware distributed? Okay, it's distributed by email. Okay, what does that look like? Let's look at that. So that just kind of gives an example of, the thing that you see that causes the impact is the ransomware, but maybe you don't want to be, the best approach to it isn't looking at the ransomware. That's a massive set of resources.
You're already, if you think of the kill chain, you've already been exploited. It's already been delivered. You're already compromised. You want to, threat intel tells you what happens prior to that, right? So you want to kind of stop it at the source almost, not worry about it after. I might be wrong, but that's instant response. That's stopping that and getting it off your network ASAP. That's already happened, right? You want to go the reconnaissance and the weaponization period point and keep that loop. Give them a heads up on that and stop it there. Not you've already been exploited. Yeah,
or look at the precursors to the ransomware, and let's say they're exploiting some vulnerability. You see that being talked about in the underground. This is before it's been put into a product and before being exploited. Right. See actors interested in it, and you research that as actors, and as actors are like, okay, they're interested in, they've used ransomware in the past. It's probably a good link that, hey, if they get that exploit, they're going to use it to deliver ransomware. Okay, let's look at that exploit. That's against this vulnerability. Okay, does that vulnerability apply to my organization? Yes, no. Okay, yes, it does. All right. Yeah, throw it over to the patching team and be like, guys, we need you to patch, guys and girls, we need you to patch this top priority. Get to it. This is why. The reason is there's an actor looking for this, and this is it. That's what threat intelligence, the type of decisions threat intelligence should be making. The reality is, we can't secure ourselves against everything, because if we could, we would have already done it, and you wouldn't need threat intelligence. The threat intelligence focus on the threats that matter and how it applies to your organization, and best spend the limited resources you have from a security perspective to deal with it.
Yeah, so it's triage and prioritizing, isn't it? Okay, now let's look forward. Someone that's at the right at the forefront of the industry, Mark, what do you believe, and this is a really broad question, is the future of threat intelligence?
I think as a whole, the large vendors you described earlier of saying that, hey, they're not doing really threat intelligence, I think they're going to have no choice but to do it. So I think threat intelligence to the common user or a low organization is going to be baked into a lot of things. So that's from an offering perspective. I think all the the main security players are going to have to do that. You saw that on SOAR, like the SOAR tool, whether it's Demisto or the others, or Phantom. They got acquired into big companies, and I think that was the precursor to that, right? So they're setting up the platforms to be able to operationalize this intelligence within an environment or customer's environment in a lot of different ways, and that's what the SOAR platform allows. And obviously, then you need the data and the intelligence to feed that, and that's where the content players come in. So I think the future from threat intelligence from a product perspective is going to be, it's baked into a lot of different products, and depending on your kind of level, maybe a level of service with that vendor, it's either going to be kind of baked in, or you can see it, or you turn on additional third-party integrations with specialists. But I think going forward, like I said, the large players are going to have to either offer it themselves or be partnered or integrated with people that do. That's what I think the future is, because I think threat intelligence has use cases, from top large organizations to mid to small. It's just the small organizations have less cycles to look at the data, so they need to just it to work. and be able to easily pull out what's of relevance to them. So I think that at a high level is where I think threat intelligence is going. How long that's going to take, I don't know.
Do you think threat intel is still a luxury? We all know FTSE 100's enterprise organizations have internal threat intel teams. That's who you liaise with. That's the majority of your stakeholders with CISOs. Do you think it's still a luxury for maybe the SMEs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, if you just think of budget-wise, it's like I said earlier, it's expensive, and I think that, there's only certain people who can pay it, and the large organizations, the large security vendors are the ones that can scale at something that's cheaper, but then scales to huge numbers of organizations, and we don't really have that happening enough yet. So is it a luxury? I'm not sure it's a luxury, because I think when budgets get cut, if it was a luxury, it would be the first thing that's getting cut, versus the opposite, which is what's happening. We're seeing people double down in threat intelligence. Maybe they cut other areas of the security budget to enable them, they want to keep the threat intelligence going. I mean, we've had like airlines that are customers that have still renewed, and like they're, having layoffs and things. So, at the end of the day, threat intelligence is driving their security spend, and that security spend might be less, but in a way they need to, be able to better direct it where they need it the most, and that's where threat intelligence comes in. So is it a luxury? I'm not sure, but I'm an Intel vendor. I would say that, wouldn't I?
Bit biased, yeah, totally. Yeah, fair point. Okay, last question, and we will let you go. You're a busy man. Mark, if you were not in cybersecurity or threat intelligence, and you weren't a software developer, because that's a cheat if you go back to that, what would you be doing?
I'd love to be a professional football player, but I'm rubbish at it.
Wouldn't we all? Yeah.
But I don't know. I haven't thought about it. What I would be doing. I mean, if I was in cybersecurity, maybe just a system administrator or something or programmer. Even though I always thought I was a mediocre programmer, I wasn't great. I could program, but
well, the Oyster card system works, so it's still going.
I didn't work on that one.
Okay.
So apologies to anybody in Seattle or yeah. But I mean, I was fine to just be a programmer, although I knew, when you're a couple of years into it, you kind of know pretty clearly that you're never going to be like top of the field. But yeah, I think I'd be probably doing that.
I was waiting for the token Aussie answer, which is a surfer living on a beach in a hut somewhere, drinking beer all day, partying. Be fun. I don't know how well it pays, but yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate your time. I know the listeners and viewers would have got some really good insight from your take on just threat intel generally, what you guys are doing. Keep up the good work. Obviously, you've grown and you're continuing to grow, which is awesome to see. So thank you, and we'll speak again.
Cool. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thanks. No worries. Cheers.